Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast. This is, I am reliably informed, episode 66. So we're continuing our run of amazing guests this year, and we're still astounded by the number of people who say yes and come on. And there's no exception this week. But before we get to that, it's going to be slightly different this week as well. So it's going to be very interesting, very interesting. But before we get to that, we'll say hello to the usual suspects. James isn't doing the intro this week, so he gets to tell us how he is. So how are you doing, James?
I'm very good indeed, thank you. We've just come off the back of having Mr. Maceman, Rick Brown at Unique Results for the weekend. So we did a full day Saturday, full day Sunday with him. I got to meet, we had about 22 people we had people from Ireland, from Scotland, from Wales, from all over England come down. So it was lovely to meet loads of people. And lots of people who also listen to the Health Oddity podcast, I was told. So that was very pleasant. But no, really, really good. Thank you.
What did he do to your wall?
Well, you've done one of his sessions before where he uses what is called coach wall. And then he gets you to stand with your back to the wall and do the 360s and the 10 to 2s with the mace and try not to hit the wall. But I was there, and you know what I'm like with keeping things neat and tidy. I could just keep hearing thud, 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 and they were taking chunks out of the breeze blocks on my wall. So Steph, my wife's been painting the wall today, and it looks lovely again.
Well, my wall there, just there in the living room, has got marks on it from Indian clubs. So that needs a bit of a paint.
Yes, no, it's good. But yeah, so we're all back to normal and we're all good. But no, it was a really good weekend. It was really, really good. Thank you.
No, it looked good. It looked good. I was a shame I couldn't make it. It was my birthday that weekend, so we were away in the Black Mountains, which was lush. Anyway, Paul, how are you doing?
I've got marks on my wall, but mainly from hitting my head against them. No, I'm fine actually. I'm actually physically feeling pretty good at the moment. I've always been moaning about this QL issue I've had, which has just been putting a handbrake on everything I've been doing. And I just got to a point where I just really wanted to concentrate on what was the strategy to get rid of it. And I've got rid of it, which is brilliant because there's nothing quite like just kind of not having any pain when you do anything. And it was just one of those really difficult muscles that was just, it's just frustrating because you just can't quite get into it. It's one of those things you can't get your hand into it. You can't manipulate it. It's just a really difficult thing. So last 2 weeks has been amazing. Like no back pain or anything. It's just a couple of things I was doing wrong and a couple of exercises added in. And so I'm feeling pretty positive about my training and everything because I was having to regress a load of things. And so it's nice to be sitting around without feeling like I'm being pulled to one side with a really tight muscle.
And has all your strength remained and all that? Yeah,
well, it's funny when you've got something that's such a major muscle, it just stops you putting any kind of power down onto anything. Even pressing became a bit of an issue. Squatting became an issue. Snatches I had to stop, and it was just like, you know, when you've got an injury and you can put up with it for a little while, and you're like, oh, that will probably disappear, and it didn't. It just kept escalating to the point where I was getting out of bed and it was hurting. You know.
The reason why I asked that, a little digression here, but the reason why I asked that is because that's where most people think like, no, I'm going to keep going because I'm going to lose all the gains or whatever I've had in the past. But you don't. You just.
Well, I'll tell you what.
It makes it worse, doesn't it?
I feel stronger now. I'm using lighter weights than I've used in 2 years.
Yeah.
I feel stronger now. I went from being I've never been a big squatter, but I was squatting, roughly body weight for multiple reps as part of the workouts, and I was doing lots of high volume snatches and lots of heavier kind of strength work. And then literally, I just got to this point where I told my coach Paul, I said, I actually had to wear a belt with my squats on a lightweight, and it was just like, okay, let's do something about this. And he literally put me down to 20 kilos on the barbell, put me down to something like 20 kilos on some single leg deadlifts. And you know what? It feels amazing. And it allows me to just focus on certain key things. And you know what? How much energy you get when you work with a lighter weight You just got to choose
No,
your
I
battles.
don't, because Paul never puts me on
No.
bloody way.
Well, you just don't look like you're in as much pain as me. So that's why I don't put them on Instagram.
Yeah, well, yeah, fair enough. No, yeah. Anyway, we've gone on long enough about us. Yeah. It's not about us, is it? So this week we've got someone. We're going to talk about something slightly different. So we have. I'll just say a quick hello, Helen.
Hello.
Hello. This is Helen. So Helen, it's Helen Hall of Hell's Bells in Portishead, which is near Bristol, just outside of Bristol, isn't it? Where the band are from.
Yeah,
the band are from there, aren't they?
They are. Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Good band.
Helen's an instructor, a strength coach who we know via Strong First, and she runs Hell's Bells, which is a kind of kettlebell club, but I mean, she does lots of training in a garage gym as well, which she's got at home, which is lush. She's converted her garage into this amazing place. So, she trains people with barbells and kettlebells and body weight and everything. She's been doing this a long time and she knows what she's talking about. But today we're going to talk about something different, but I'll let Helen introduce herself first. And then we'll go on from there to talk about the thing that Helen is going to talk about. So Helen, give us a little bit of background about yourself and then what you're up to at the moment.
Okay, so, thanks for inviting me on, guys. When we had that conversation back in September at the Strong First Bodyweight, one of the things I said to you is you need to feature more women. Yep. And so you went, right, what are you going to talk about then? So I went away and was like, okay, right, I best get on this and think about it. But anyway, it's great to be on board. I've listened to loads of your podcasts and I'm really enjoying them. So they sort of take me on my journeys when I go after the different events of Strong First when I'm doing them over the last few months. So background on me, I did 25 years of teaching, started out as a PE teacher. And then progressed up through the ranks and ended up sort of as an assistant head, but then took about 12 years out to have kids. And once the boys became a bit older, I kind of needed to regroup and think about what I wanted to do. Wasn't entirely sure I wanted to go back into the profession of teaching. So I went down the coaching route. So pulling the PE that I did in the past and obviously the kettlebells, and then set up Hell's Bells. It will be nearly 4 years ago now. And the club's just gone from strength to strength, really. So I've got about 90 active members now, mainly women, which is why I'm getting up and running on what I'm going to talk about today. So that gives you a little bit of background as to where I come from.
Excellent. 90 active members. You've got a waiting list as well, haven't you? It's fantastic.
I do have a waiting list. It's a really nice position to be in, but people don't leave. So they don't leave. I can't get them in. So actually what I've done recently is just put on an extra class and brought on another Strong First instructor to start taking some sessions or a session with a view to getting that waiting list down. So it's all positive. We've got through the last 18 months, which have been pretty rubbish. And I'm now in a position to grow the club again. So all good.
Excellent.
That's fantastic.
I just wanted to explain for people who are watching, we spoke last time about we will raise a hand or have some way of signaling if there's an acronym that needs explaining or if I want something explained because I'm a bit slow. So I actually have the acronym HAMMER. So if I hold the hammer up for Helen, I'd like to ask a question, or if someone uses an acronym, I'll hold the hammer up and then we can delve into more detail.
Oh, it's like being back at school, James. Managing a group of kids.
Oh, you had one in mind there. I thought Helen, I was like, has she used an acronym?
I did actually think she used PE. And I think that some people from America might not have, they probably don't use, do they use PE?
Yeah.
Gym, class,
physical
whatever.
Education.
Physical education in school.
Sports teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an easy acronym. That's an easy acronym.
Yeah, we'll have that one. That's all right. So, so Helen, what we're going to talk about today, and this is, like I was saying before we started recording, I mean, I don't know anything about this subject. And it's one of those things that you know, as a bloke, you think you might not need to know about it, but actually you do, because, you know, my partner's going to go through this at some point. Everybody's will. So, and everybody, and every female has to go through it. So, yeah, we're talking about menopause, right?
Yep, menopause and perimenopause, actually. So there's two distinct elements to it that we kind of need to cover.
Yeah. And we're also going to talk about the like kind of training around it as well, but it's not necessarily all about that, because everyone's got to go through it anyway, right? So it doesn't matter if you're actively training or not.
No.
But we kind of want to get across that you still can't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think at this point, I just do want to caveat, I am not an expert. Okay, so I have not got any qualifications in what I'm talking about, but what I am talking about is my own experiences. So I hit 50 in September, and basically over the last, I would say, looking back on it, over the last 4 to 5 years, I've noticed a number of symptoms and a number of issues creeping in, which some have impacted on my training, some have impacted on my personal life. And it got to a point where I thought, actually, I need to understand more about what is going on in my body and why this is happening. But also from a coaching perspective, a lot of the women that I coach are similar age. I suppose you attract that age group. They're my age or older, or, you know, and we're all beginning to head on down this journey of what the perimenopause is and what the menopause is. So really, that's really important to understand. I'm not an expert in the true context, but I'm becoming an expert in my own right because of what I'm going through, and also helping to support others. So for me, I think
James has got his hammer up.
Go on. What?
No, yeah, I was just going to say. So first off, can you actually describe what, you know, perimenopause is and what menopause is, and the difference? Because especially as men, we hear these things, you know, and you know, some men it will go just fly over their heads, and you think you know what something is, and you don't necessarily know. So if you can explain that to begin with, that'd be brilliant.
So perimenopause, in essence, is the precursor to menopause. Okay, and in anyone who is 40 plus, any woman who is 40 plus, to a lesser or greater extent, will have some perimenopausal symptoms. Now, you might not even know about it in your early 40s. And actually, to be fair, I don't think it really became evident to me till I was about 47, 48. But once you get to your mid 40s, the basic issue that's happening is that your estrogen levels, which all the way along throughout, once you start having your periods from the age of 13, 14 or even younger, your estrogen levels gradually start to taper off. And with that dip in estrogen, there becomes symptoms and issues that can arise as a result of that dip in estrogen. But the thing about this dip in estrogen is it doesn't just do that. It doesn't just go down. It can go down and up within the wave of going down. So the perimenopause, you can have days where you feel absolutely 100% as a woman and you don't experience any symptoms, and you can wake up the next day and feel like you're in a really dark hole, or other symptoms, which we'll talk about as we move forward. So the perimenopause can go on for 10, 12, 15 years. And then you get to a point where your periods stop. And then and again, this is where I'm not the expert, because it varies according to which websites you look at. But once you've not had periods for, I think it's 2 years, you're then considered menopausal. So you've gone through it and you're menopausal. Okay. So most of what we will talk about in today will be more the perimenopausal and that journey that you're going on, because it's those changes that are really challenging at times to manage for a lot of women. And as you correctly said, Pete, it doesn't matter whether you are a coach, you're married, got a partner, whether you've got daughters, they are all going to go through this And even my sons have a better understanding of it now, because I think it's really important for them. And there's nothing out there really, or there hasn't been anything out there until recently.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. That was one of the reasons. Like when we were talking at the bodyweight thing, and I've seen there's a coach who used to be at your place, James, Mel, who talks about it on Instagram as well. And I saw her talking about it. And I've got a couple of ladies who are trained. One's in her 60s, and she said she never did anything about it. She went through it and never did anything. Never took any HRT or anything like that. Didn't do anything about it. And she's wondering if she should have done and if she should now. So obviously, you know, I'm going to try and find out about that, or get her to go and find out about it. And there's another lady who I train online who's in her early 50s, who's basically said she's getting like lots of symptoms and she doesn't know what to do about it. So she's going to go and see the doctor. And I was like, it seems that it's one of those things people don't seem to know about it, and then don't seem to really bother about it until it's happening. And then it's like, by then it's not too late, but it's like, you'd rather get ahead of it, wouldn't you? You'd rather at least know there is something you can do.
I think it's really, really important that we as coaches and we understand it. So it's just about having that knowledge to then, because actually just having the knowledge up here allows you to then manage it more effectively. Because actually, without that knowledge, it's quite a scary thing, because you know, when you're at school and you get to the point of puberty, the boys have that chat, don't they? They get taken into that separate room, and then the girls go into a separate room and have the period talk, and you at least get that knowledge. And, you know, parents obviously in most cases have those conversations as you're in the teenage years, but there's pretty much nothing out there for those individuals or women once they get into their 40s. And to the credit of people like Davina McCall, there is a bit of a revolution going on at the moment. Whether you like her or not, she's done a lot of good around increasing the profile of menopause. She recently did a program on Channel 4, which was really good to watch, talking to different women about their stories, and they're lobbying the government around a number of issues around HRT and the way it's being prescribed, and making it free on the NHS, because obviously there's a cost implication to all of this as well and also taking away the stigma around HRT, because if you go back sort of 10-15 years, there was a huge amount of issues around women taking HRT, and then they said there was an increase in breast cancer, and because of that everyone was scared to take it. So and that stigma still exists, so I'm still getting people ask me about that, and yet actually the research now has disproved that and said that there isn't a correlation between taking HRT and breast cancer. And in essence, all you're doing when you start to take HRT, you are replacing something in your body that your body has stopped making naturally.
Yeah,
that's it.
So HRT, I'm pretty sure everyone will probably know what it is, but it's hormone replacement.
Oh, here comes the hammer.
There's the hammer. James, you're not doing your job properly, James. But it's hormone replacement therapy, right?
Yeah. So as a young teen, in your early 20s, women take the pill. That is a hormone that is into the body to prevent us from obviously falling pregnant. Then you tend to, obviously most women come off that. Then a lot of women have the coil, which again is another hormone that then secretes into the system to stop you from falling pregnant. You get to the next step, obviously those levels are falling off. So the idea of the hormone replacement therapy or treatment is that you are then taking a pill or a gel or a patch that will support you to stop those levels from dropping off, and hopefully even a lot of the symptoms out.
So can you just talk to us a little bit about what the symptoms are? You know, like we have a lot of women in their 50s who train with us. I do talk to a lot of the women, so I kind of get a little bit of an understanding, but I'd obviously like a lot more of an understanding and kind of talk to them. But yeah, so what kind of symptoms are you talking about?
I'm going to talk to you about it on two levels. Firstly, I'll talk to you about it from my perspective and where I went with this, and then I'll talk to you about generic symptoms, so if that makes sense. So what happened for me was that during lockdown, I hit a massive low. Like, I'm a pretty steady Eddie. I'm not someone who's up and down. I just get on with life. I pretty much manage what life throws at me. And I got to a point in lockdown where I left the house and I genuinely wasn't sure I was going to come back. And that's how desperate I felt. And it's really, really difficult for me to even put that into words and to describe how I was feeling. My hubby did not know what the hell to do. And we've got a good relationship. We are very open with our relationship and talk freely, but he didn't know how to manage me. And my kids also were getting the brunt of it. So and there was definitely a correlation between the symptoms of feeling very, very down, and when my period was due and the hormones inside of me building up or dropping, whatever it was. And I really didn't know whether it was lockdown or whether it was the hormones or whether it was a combination of the both. So I made a call at that time because I felt so rubbish that I needed to go and see someone. And I booked privately to go and see a hormone replacement, or a nurse, a hormonal nurse, she's based in Bristol, called the Bristol Menopause Clinic. And I went to see her and presented and basically said, am I going mad? Genuinely, I felt like I was about to explode. And she said to me, no, you're not going mad. You're absolutely, and it was so reassuring. I could have almost cried, because I don't class myself as someone who was depressed, but I genuinely felt I was falling into a hole and I wasn't sure how to get out of it. And she said to me, no, we can work on this, we can sort this. And that's how I started my journey. So for me, the symptoms were very much tracking my period, which was becoming more and more erratic, because obviously as I'm getting older, they're not as consistent. So I was going 6 to 8 weeks. I was then going 2 weeks. I would then go 3 months. I would then go once a month. And in itself, that's challenging as a woman when you don't know where you're at. But physically, I was getting pains, aches all over. So my joints were really sore. So, you talk about your QL, and also into the hips, and it was just, and I thought, God, this is not good, because I didn't want to train, and I've never not wanted to train. I was very irritable, like once towards just before the period would come, I just do not step over the line, to the point that Simon hubby was saying to the kids, just tread carefully for the next few days. And that's not normal. That's not right to be living in a house like that. And I was aware I was doing it, but I couldn't change the outcome. I knew that I needed to do something about it, because I was just going, wah. And then things would just calm down and I'd be absolutely fine. All the pains would go, the irritability would go, and you'd get normal Helen back. So they were my kind of main symptoms. I didn't get the hot flushes. That's what everybody associates with HRT. Everyone thinks about hot flushes, sweats. I didn't get any of that. I did obviously get the anxiety. And I'm really fortunate I didn't get the insomnia, because a lot of women with the sweats, they often come at night. And as a result of that, they can't sleep. So, I mean, there is a list as long as your arm of symptoms, and you can almost attribute any symptom when someone is in their 40s, 50s towards, it's probably HRT.
So given that one of the, I suppose, confusing things is, if so much can be attributed to it,
Mm-hmm.
is often, sometimes when something's so widespread that you might not even see it, you can't see the wood for the trees. You're getting this a little bit with COVID at the moment, that I spoke to someone a few days ago and they said, well, look, a common cold could be attributed to symptoms of COVID. You know, it's like, well, okay, so what is this? How do I know it? So, I mean, is there like a rule of thumb that you would that someone should follow if they think they need to go to an expert? You know, is there a sequence of things that happen?
That's the trouble with this. I don't think there is a sequence, and I don't think any woman will have the same story. Everybody will, you know, has a different symptoms. Everyone experiences it different times. There is no steadfast. You can't say at 45 this will happen. For some women it happens much earlier. For other women it happens much later. However, there is a thing called the green climatic scale that you can go on to, and that has like almost like a tick list.
Right.
And that was the first thing that when I went to see Hazel at the Bristol Menopause Clinic, who she said to me, right, we went through this list, and you know, in essence, I could go, yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me, and it's a massive long list. And at that point, it gave her a good indicator. And I think also there's no question that once you're in your late 40s, it is going to be hormonal. The biggest issue, and I was really fortunate that I was able to pay to go privately, because the experience, and I can speak of many of my friends locally, but I also know this is part of the wider picture as well, is that sadly, when you go to your GP, there are a number of, firstly, they don't tend to always take you seriously, although I do think that is changing, because I think it's having to change because of all the press around it at the moment. Secondly, they don't have enough understanding of it themselves. So when you look into what a GP does with their training, they don't even necessarily touch on it. So they are making changes to put courses in place now for GPs to be able to support women. But thirdly, often the symptoms are that of depression. So I can name you half a dozen of my friends who were put on antidepressants, and yet they weren't depressed in the same way that I wasn't depressed. I knew I wasn't depressed because I'm not predisposed to that, but I knew something wasn't right. And actually when I went to the clinic, they said to me, the chances are, had I gone to the GP, they would have put me on antidepressants rather than HRT. Now that I would never have wanted to have gone down that route personally. I would have wanted to avoid it. And the one thing that the clinic said to me was, actually, it's easier to come off of HRT than it is to come off antidepressants. So it's almost, if you're in that category of late 40s, it's almost better to try the HRT before you go down the antidepressant route. It's not to say you don't need antidepressants, and I'm not poo-pooing them because they work for many, but I would have far rather have explored the hormonal route before I went down any other chemical intervention.
Yeah, because that's almost like a misdiagnosis, because we talked to a number of people on the podcast who, and with the NHS, you know, everyone does their best, but they're absolutely worked, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, you've got maybe, you know, 1 or 2 minutes with someone to for them to make a quick diagnosis and, you know, write you a prescription, and you're on your way in many cases. So
yeah.
So
I suppose that's the difference between us and, say, the NHS is that we have so much time with people. You know, we're kind of selling our time, we're selling our kind of relationships. You know, obviously people go to classes, they sweat and lift weights, but you know, the amount of time that we talk with our clients far usurps anything that you probably get access to certainly in the National Health Service, but even, you know, depending on budget, your access to private healthcare. So it obviously we can't we're in no way a replacement in any way, but it's why I would understand that it's so difficult to start getting answers, because you're going into an organization, into a system that's very time poor.
Yeah.
But I find it, I mean, it's obviously not, you know, it's not the GP's fault if that's their training. That's
what I
training,
mean. They've got, you know, to do.
It's the fault of whoever provides the training or whoever oversees that. And then, but this is what comes out of it, right? We'll have discussions like this, and the Davina thing, trying to get it out into the open, and more people trying to get it out in the open to get that changed. And to get it to a point where actually you have got someone who you can go to and all that. Because I mean, people trust their doctors and stuff like that, but it's like, if the doctor hasn't got the information, they can't really help, I suppose.
Yeah, they've got nowhere to go with it.
It's a cascade, though, isn't it?
Would you say so? So with if someone's concerned that this is happening to them, right? Would you say it's good to keep like a diary of symptoms?
Absolutely.
Because you said you went to the clinic and then they said, right, well, go away and check these things. So you could go in with that already armed with that, with the information, say, here's what's been happening. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and they'll be able to say that looks exactly like.
That has to be your starting point, Peter. You have to initially track your periods. You have to track what's happening at different times in the month with your cycle, whether the symptoms become more acute at certain times in the month. So you do have to sort of be quite intelligent around that information and tracking it. But that's the starting point for sure. And then potentially what the doctors can do is they can do a blood test. Now, they don't like to do that blood test, again, because obviously there's a cost implication to that. And if I'm honest, they didn't suggest that for me, because they said you are perimenopausal because of your age. I think if someone was to present in their late 30s with menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, they would probably do the blood test to see whether or not the levels were dropping significantly, because it does happen early perimenopause. So that would be the next step, to do that and actually look at, you know, what's happening with your bloods.
Because it sounds like if you catch some of these things early, that you actually prevent a load of other secondary issues later on, which, you know, if you, like you were experiencing depression and that went quite far with you and quite deep, and that led to.
I do think some of that was down to homeschooling, to be fair.
We all love children.
Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's like, right, I'm leaving the house and I'm not coming back. See you later.
But you are absolutely right. I think it's about identifying it. It's about possibly putting in something earlier to prevent that from getting worse. Yeah. But again, you see, from a government point of view, there's a huge cost implication to that, because your prescriptions and having to generate those products. And there's been a massive increase in demand for HRT. It is much more openly discussed now, and people are presenting with their symptoms and asking for help. But obviously, the government have got to, and they're lobbying now that it should be a free prescription.
Well, if you do it now, then you don't pay later, then, do you? You know, I mean, think about someone who you've diagnosed early on. But you give them the support necessary, then it won't be those kind of secondary, third characteristics that people experience that become worse and worse and worse.
Yep.
You can prevent those things, which cost ultimately in the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
That's long-term thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can cite you an example of that. One of the ladies that I coach, who's a lovely lady, really strong, really huge issues with her hip, and constantly, so she had scans, she went for MRIs. You know, she was pushing, she had physio, all of those things. And in the end, I said to her, go and get your hormone levels checked, because I believe that your aches and pains are to do with your estrogen levels dropping. They put her on HRT, the pains went. And it really was quite, revolutionary for her. You're absolutely right. That would have saved the NHS a significant amount of money if they'd made that decision earlier.
So sorry, Pete, do you want to go on?
I was going to say, like, because you spoke about this, I think you've been speaking about this on your Instagram page, channel, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And it was about, because there are people, right, who are like, I don't like to take drugs. I don't like to take pills for things. If I get a headache, I'll just go through it. I don't want to take even paracetamol and stuff like that. There's people like that, right? But with this, it's kind of like, if you don't do anything about it, you're going to have to endure it, aren't you? Whereas, if you are not necessarily antidepressants and stuff like that, but if you go to a clinic like you did and the recommend something, what would you say about that as somebody who's a bit scared of not scared, but it's kind of, it goes against everything that they stand for, to take drugs to solve problems, because they want to do it kind of like, because you said you were going to talk about it holistically maybe as well.
So there are two routes that you can take, or three routes. You can do nothing and you just manage it as best as you can, which, if you go back historically, even 10 years ago, that was exactly what women did. I'm too busy to have the menopause. I'm just working. And actually, I think it's really important to acknowledge that at this age as well, you've got your teenage children. Many of those women, they've got their jobs and all the symptoms that they're managing, which is, so they don't have time to manage it. That's, one option, do nothing. The second one is obviously to consider taking some sort of hormone replacement therapy. In my case, that's estrogen, which I take in the form of a gel. But you can do that in patches that you sort of stick on you. I don't do the patches because I'm too active and doing too much sport, but they tend to unpeel. So a lot of the people that listen to this may find that the gel is a better option for them if they're training regularly. And then linked to that, I also take a progesterone tablet, which is, in essence, it without massive detail, it looks at stopping the lining of the womb from thickening, because when you reintroduce the estrogen that is dropping into the body or has fallen, it can impact on your period. So it kind of regulates that and helps those to even out. All right. So I just do a combination of two. It's really important to caveat as well that it takes time to get that balance right. So I will have been on the HRT for nearly a year in January, and I'm still tweaking it and seeking advice and going back to have consultations to make sure it's right for me. So, I've upped my dosage. I've had to change around and play with it a little bit. Not personally, I've been prescribed it differently. Yeah. So I'm not changing it without consultation, just a caveat. But the other route is, if you don't want to go down that, I think there are things that we can do to support those individuals as coaches. And also as an individual, you can look into, so the first thing is you can managing your stress levels. Obviously the obvious one is to reduce your sugar intake, because there is a correlation between stress and sugar, and there is a correlation between insomnia and sugar. So certainly looking to reduce, for example, when you have your sugary drinks, if you're having, maybe don't have them at bedtime, to support you with a better night's sleep. So that's one of the ways. And also sugar really does impact on your hormonal levels. It spikes and sends it up and down. So regulating that, I think, is key. And I'd like to think that the diet that I follow, I say diet, I don't like to use that word, but the nutritional choices that I make, sugar doesn't feature highly for me. So maybe that's why I don't get the sweats. But I've got individuals who properly flush up, even just sat there, and I'm sure there is a correlation between that and potential sugar.
That's really interesting, actually, because like you get all these classic symptoms which you haven't necessarily had, but you live a healthy lifestyle, right? And maybe that's
Most
really
of the
interesting,
time.
actually.
That was one of my questions.
Reason, but...
That was one of my questions is, when we're talking about the onset of some of these symptoms, I don't know if any studies have been done into the lifestyle factors that determine whether or not someone goes in their early 40s or like yourself in your late 40s. Is it just purely a ticking time bomb in terms of your genetics, or is it something that you can control? Yeah. If someone's 30 or 25 listening to this, can they extend that period before they have to deal with it through lifestyle?
Yeah, in answer to that, I don't know. But you're right around, I wonder whether there is some like age and understanding, and also class, as middle class individuals who seek information and can afford to pay for the products that we want. I think you'll find that there are a lot more of middle-class women who are taking HRT, whereas if you were to go to a more deprived area, potentially they can't afford to do that. So, but again, I'm not up on the research on it, so I'm,
It's interesting. I find that. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be able to talk much more about that because we don't know about it. But it's an interesting it's an interesting thing to open up and actually see if we can. Because like was said, you've said you're not an expert on this. You're just someone who's living through it. But it would be great if there is anyone listening who knows of anyone who is an expert on this and who can open up this subject more and talk about it and give us more information and all of that. That would be brilliant. So if anyone does know anyone, then let us know.
I think, holistically looking at your nutrition is key. I think making sensible choices around what you're eating is going to support you. I mean, it supports you with a lifestyle, doesn't it, that you want to live, but it definitely will impact with your perimenopause. And then there's also, I think you can look at other alternatives and supplements as well. So, the obvious one is, if you're struggling with sleep, is to look at your magnesium levels and potentially take a magnesium tablet, which can aid sleep. You can also look at, because one of the other symptoms that often women get is issues with their skin. So you get like a perimenopausal acne, which is horrendous at 40, in your 40s, 50s, to suddenly get spots again. Women don't want that. So you can look at vitamin E, so there are holistic options out there. Vitamin D, I think, is important, and really important, particularly in the winter months, to support us with the aches and pains and the lack of sun. So, again, that holistic view, and actually I do a combination of all of the above. So, I take my vitamin D in the winter because I feel that benefits me and helps to keep my joints moving, and it just supports me. I don't need to do the magnesium. My head hits the pillow and I'm out.
And do you think because you have a very high base level of fitness, that you were more sensitive and more aware of your body? Because obviously you mentioned you work mainly with women, are you noticing that your awareness of your body and the awareness of the kind of inputs and outputs of your body, you'll pick up on in a way that other people just take as, oh, that's just aging, or that's just my life, or I always thought that's what you felt like when you woke up in the morning, or
no, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, I think I'm fortunate in that position that I do have an understanding and knowledge. And like what I do is I work really hard with the individuals that present to me to support them to make those choices and understand more about it. So it's like you said, Pete, at the beginning of this about your guy with the bad back. I refuse to accept that anyone has a bad back and just getting old. It's part of getting old. That's absolutely rubbish.
He was 50. This wasn't on the recording, was it? This was a mate of mine who I was talking to last night, actually, who's 50, and he says his back's in constant pain, but it's because of his age. And I was like, no, it isn't. But anyway.
But it's the same for the women I'm with. So I really do try to holistically support them in every respect. So the strength training isn't just about physically being strong, it's about mentally being strong. And certainly for a lot of women, as their estrogen levels drop and they potentially get this anxiety and these low moods, that the number of times I'll have someone, and I know you will experience this as well, someone walks into your session and they look dreadful, you can just tell, that moment where they walk through, oh dear, gonna have to tread carefully today. And an hour later, that person walks out smiling. And that's, for me, where the benefits of strength training are just more than strength. You talked earlier about not lifting heavy weights all the time. It ultimately kind of doesn't matter. It's about allowing these people to move well, move safely, and then all the benefits that brings of being, better mental well-being, more positive about life, able to cope with the stresses of whatever is being presented at them. So it is that holistic thing, isn't it, of an understanding.
Is there some kind of, obviously a lot of people who listen to this will do some kind of exercise or training, or they'll be looking to do some kind of exercise or training. Is there anything that is promoted as being better for people who are kind of perimenopausal and menopausal, or any exercise they should be looking to do, or any exercise potentially they should be looking to avoid? I mean, have you got any information around that?
Yeah, no, I think I'm biased, obviously, but it's strength training. It is about strength training, and because you don't need to go to an exercise class where it's 50 reps, 50 this, 60 burpees, 70 whatever. Not at our age, not least because you probably wet yourself. because our pelvic floor is impacted from having had children, and we've all been there and been to those coaches, those young 20-year-old coaches who come on, and you get to a point where you're like, no, I don't want to do that. What is this achieving? So for me, I really think strength training is the way forward. And yeah, I'm biased. Of course I'm biased. That's what I base my business around, but it works. But I don't over-rep my clients. I would rather than do less, but do it well. And we focus on form, we focus on technique, and the key thing around a lot of this is pelvic floor. Because again, when your estrogen levels drop, there is a correlation between incontinence increasing, because again, everything starts to drop quite literally. So I have a big focus on breathing, and the techniques around breathing correctly, because as women we spend our lives trying to hold our tummies in because we're taught to not have bellies. So most of the women that come to me, they breathe here. They don't breathe into their bellies, and it's trying to encourage them to breathe into their bellies correctly, to sling their pelvic floor, to strengthen everything up, which in turn will strengthen them, but also give them that, that satisfaction of mental well-being. So, definitely strength training. Pilates, I think, is another good one. I know that there are different camps out there for that, but I do think that, and yoga, anything I think that's going to support your mental well-being, it doesn't, it's not a bad thing, is it? And I'm not going to say you shouldn't do any type of activity. I think ultimately whatever makes you happy, but making sure that you're doing it safely and making sure that you've got an instructor who has an understanding of what you're trying to achieve.
It sounds like though that the hormonal issues, like we know that the role of estrogen in bone density and muscle mass, and obviously once you hit probably past 30, you're on a downward trajectory, whether you like it or not, however active you are on muscle mass and bone density, both sexes, but more, it's obviously acceleration in loss of both those things. And if we look at the history of most people's eating behaviors, we see people who go on crash diets. A lot of people who've approached me in the past have been on things like juice diets, like liquid diets, things like that. And, and God knows, if you're eating chronically, under eating for periods of time, crash diets, and the effects that has on hormonal responses, but also on bone density, muscle mass, and things like that. Then you can compound that with the perimenopause. Then you're going to be in a situation where, as you age and get in 60s, you're much more at risk of breakages.
Osteoporosis,
things like that. And was it Dan John who was talking about one of the biggest killers in America is falling, because once you've fallen, you've got a 4-year lifespan afterwards, on average. So it goes back to strength training.
I think just before we came on, we were talking about the DEXA scan, because I was going to ask you about bone density and things relating to perimenopause and menopause as well. Because we've got Owen from My Vital Metrics coming on in a couple of episodes' time, and I went up to London and had this DEXA scan, and he was talking to me about when he does this scan with women in their their 40s and their 50s and beyond, and he was explaining the bone density and it obviously we try and do everything we can on this podcast to kind of go against it, but the typical advice or the typical exercise modalities that women are advised for and go towards are cardiovascular, they're swimming, they're yoga, they're very gentle, they're not really strength training traditionally. I know that is changing again gradually, and we're trying to do our best to change it, but that does absolutely nothing to really, prevent that kind of reduction in bone mineral density and build strong muscle, a strong bone as well. So I think strength training for women is well, as we all know, and we're all kind of preaching to the converted here, or preaching to the choir, whatever the phrase is, is massive. But I think it's still not commonly done by most women out there.
No, it isn't, and you're absolutely right. Any movement is good, isn't it? if they want to swim, swim. If you want to cycle, cycle. It's not a bad thing. But most of the individuals that come to me, a lot of them do something in addition. So they now strength train and spin, or they now strength train and cycle, or they, swim, whatever it is. And they all find a significant improvement in the alternative activity as a result of their strength training. So they'll present to me and they'll say, do you know what? I knocked a minute off my 5K run last week. And, once they've been training with me for 2 to 3 months or whatever, or I managed to do an extra 10 lengths in the pool. Well, yeah, that's because your shoulders are stronger now, because we've been doing presses and we've been doing rows and we've been using the kettlebell for the swings, So, and my leg kick's more powerful in swimming. Yeah, of course your leg kick's more powerful. I've had you doing a shed load of squats, and the explosive power that we create through the swing. So, yeah, we are preaching to the converted. The four of us are sat here because we know it works, but there is definitely an impact on your well-being mentally and physically as a result of strength training.
Do you think that, just to ask a separate question again, on a similar track, do you can only obviously talk from your own experience, but have you noticed a change in the way that you need to eat, or in nutrition, your nutritional strategies and things, as you've moved into your late 40s, now 50s? Do you, because we speak to so many people on here, and lots of the experts that we tend to speak to now are in their their 50s and 60s, and a lot of them talk about, as they've aged, they've kind of changed slightly the way they've eaten, and maybe eating less now, and you've already mentioned sugar and things like that. But I just wondered, on a personal level, if you've changed anything up in the last kind of 5 years or so.
I mean, my diet has changed hugely, the food that I eat, and as my knowledge of strength training has increased. If I go back, I'd never lifted a weight 8 years, 10 years ago. I didn't know what that was. I was that cardio queen. I would go out and I would swim and I would do aerobics. And back in the day, I'd have my leg warmers on, doing step, and double back-to-back spin classes, because to me, that was the way that I would keep my weight down. And that's how I spent my life. And as I got into strength training and kettlebells, I then increased my understanding of the benefits of nutrition and protein and how that helps with muscle repair and muscle growth, etc., etc. And so my diet is nothing like it was in my 30s, nothing like it was in my 20s. I just wish I knew what I know now 20, 30 years ago, really, because I do think that the younger generation have a better understanding of it a lot of the time. But then there's still a lot of misinformation out there, isn't there? So
I was going to say actually a bit earlier, and I realised my mic stopped working. So I was talking to myself. I am noticing that, in a way, many women are coming in with a much more forward-thinking perspective than many of the men that I sit in front of. Women are saying, I want to be strong. And that is frequently what I'm hearing now. Yes, of course, there is always, I want to be slim, I want to fit into clothes, or I want weight loss. But it's amazing how many women are sitting there saying, I want to be strong. And they keep using words that really excite me, with things like skill, technique. I want to learn, I want to educate myself, and all those things. With guys, not so much. They're very much more focused on either on output, and it's more difficult to keep a guy engaged for a long period of time, because I don't think they're going they haven't quite got that concept of educating themselves, because they've got two hands and legs and they can do it themselves. It is my personal gripe about just getting men to realize that sometimes they can get outside help in order to get better at things. But it's really exciting to see women starting to think about, I just want to get strong. And I think that's going to give it's a great tool in the box to deal with a lot of things that life's going to throw at you.
I completely agree. I love it when someone comes to me and they're not talking about wanting to lose weight. And I don't talk to them about diets. I talk to them about nutritional changes and lifestyle changes, and making it a habit and making it part of your routine, as opposed to just doing a 6-week, 8-week quick fix, whatever that may be, that more often than not results in them gaining more weight. And whenever we have focuses within the club, which I do quite often, they aren't about weight loss. They're about looking at creating new habits and looking at how we can move forward and make that, sustain that once they're moving it independently without the accountability that I can offer. But it's ultimately, and for a lot of women, it's about eating more, isn't it?
Well, this is what's great about like people when they start training, doesn't matter what it is, but say they start strength training with you or one of us. I very rarely start with nutrition because people don't want to know about that. But like, I don't want to have to change what I do. So it's like, right, just come along, we'll get training. And then after a while, they're like, well, it makes me feel really good, but when I eat this, I feel bad, or I'm not losing the body fat that I want to lose, or whatever. And then it's like, okay, so we'll talk a bit about nutrition then, because then they become interested in it, don't they? Because like, well, it's not just about that. I want to do more exercise, and I'm doing that, but that doesn't seem to be that hasn't solved everything. And it's like exactly because you've got to look at lots of different aspects, but people rarely come to you for nutrition. They come to you to be trained. So it's like, right, well, we'll start there because you want to do that. And
that's interesting, I think, because trying to differentiate part of the education of our clients is to say that, yes, the difference between coaching and exercise, because you can go to a gym and just join a class and turn up and disappear and have exercise. But when you go to see Peter or any of you too, it's like, okay, we're here to be coached and you're here to be in that mindset. And actually part of our job is to sometimes take things away, say, okay, actually you don't need to deal with nutrition at the moment. It's probably more than you can handle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the right time.
I got sent, there's a guy called Ben Morris who Finn trains now actually, but he did one of my, like a couple of programs a couple of years ago. He's Year Burpees on,
oh yeah,
Instagram.
Yeah.
He's great. He's a great guy. He's in Bristol actually. He's a really nice bloke. But he like we talk on WhatsApp here and there, and he sent me an article because he said he listened to the podcast we were talking about taking things away instead of adding more into what you're doing into your life. Like in anything, people are like, right, I need to add this in and I need to add this in. It's like, no, you need to take a load of stuff out and just take a step back. James, you've been posting a bit. Yeah, James has been posting about this as well. I saw that post he put up today about that. And he'd sent an article. It was a newspaper article. I can't remember what newspaper it was in. It wasn't in the Sun or the Star or anything like that. It was in a proper one. But it was and it was about kids on using balance bikes now instead of stabilizers, training wheels. And how putting training wheels onto a bike and then learning to cycle with those, you're still wobbling around. It makes it actually, once you take them off, it doesn't make it any easier. Whereas using a balance bike, kids learn how to balance themselves with their own body, and then it makes riding easier. So it's like instead of just adding stuff to help, it's like, well, what can you take out that's causing problems?
Definitely works.
So it was interesting.
Yeah, likewise, it worked with my two.
Yeah, it's just really interesting stuff like that. It's like because people. I think in this article, it said there was like some study that was done. You've always got to be worried, about like who did the study and why they did it and all that. But most people would think you have to add things in to programs or to something to try and make it better. And very few people look at taking things away.
Well,
James, just to pick up on a point though about my diet and changing, that I would say that I think there is an element that as you become, as you get older, there is a correlation between a lot of people becoming more sedentary. So there is evidence to suggest that you should reduce your calorie intake if you are that way inclined so you don't then gain weight. For me personally, obviously I'm still physically active, but what I don't ever track my calories. I don't feel the need to do that. But what I do focus on is nutrient dense food, so that I'm feeling fuller for longer, and that I have the energy then to cope with the demands that the day is going to throw at me, whether that's being a mum, whether that's being a coach, whether that is my own personal training or shipping the kids off to their activities, it's all those things. So it isn't definitely that. I think as you get older, your metabolism does slow, and you have a lot of women present to you as coaches who maybe have gained weight as a result of HRT or the perimenopause and the menopause, and they're really low as a result of it. It's all very, very intertwined. So it's supporting them in that instance, like you say, Pete, to get moving, whatever that movement may be, and then introducing those little nuggets of nutrition around this might be a way forward for you. This might be more effective. You might want to try this. Have you actually analysed how much sugar you're having? You know, have you gone on a low-fat diet that now means you're substituting all your sugar for a preservative sugar of some description, which could be giving you the headaches or the joint pain or whatever. So I think personally, for me, it's about having that open dialogue. And I bide my time, like you, Pete. I don't have those conversations all the time. But if that dialogue comes up within a small group training session, I will then obviously support them, and I support them within the club page, within Facebook and our close page, where people will ask a question, I'll answer it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's one of the things you might get. You might get women who come to you who are, have been feeling down, have been feeling like not necessarily depressed, but just down, like you said, and thinking like, oh, I'm low on energy. So they think, oh, I need to eat more sugar or something like that. So they probably think,
it's a quick fix, isn't it?
It's actually making things worse.
Yeah.
What we haven't asked you is how do you you obviously went through that and you've had the therapy and all that sort of stuff. So what's changed? What's made you, how's that made you feel?
The HRT that I'm now taking, I'm definitely more of a steady Eddie.
So it's basically put you back to where you were.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm still managing stuff behind the scenes around what's happening with my periods, etc., and it's a bit of a nightmare, but I'm much more level-headed, so I'm in a better position then to cope with whatever else is thrown at me. And actually, if you were to ask my kids and hubby, they would say the same. So there's testament.
There's a kind of unspoken thing. There's an unspoken element to this, which is often this happens at a time of life where people are loaded with huge amounts of responsibilities. Perhaps they've climbed up the corporate ladder. Maybe you've got more responsibility at work, managing teams, managing projects, things like that. You also a lot of pressure on marriages, a lot of pressures in mortgages, a lot of pressures on having children, and all the things that go with managing their lives as well. So often this kind of thing compounds already very, very stressful time in people's lives. And it goes back to this thing, sometimes the job is to take things away, because there's obviously a lot of other things just piling on top of people, which makes it very difficult to see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, for sure. Stripping it back was key. I had to take a proper step back from things and go back to what are my priorities. And ultimately, when you start to strip that back, I always use the analogy of the oxygen mask on the plane. So when that oxygen mask comes down on the plane, the first thing they tell you to do is to put it on yourself before you help others. And I had to go back last January when I was feeling really low and say to myself, right, I've got to sort myself out here, because I need to be okay in myself in order to support, firstly, my boys and my husband, but also the people that present in front of me. Because if I'm not in a good position to take their load and help them, then the whole thing is falling apart. So, you sort of enable yourself before you work with others. And that was why I made that step last year, to go and actually speak to someone about this and put something in place, because I didn't like the person I was becoming, and that was impacting on the wider circle.
So I suppose I was just going to say, there's people obviously who listen to this podcast, all over the world really now. We've got Australia and America and Canada and all over Europe and stuff. But so we don't really know the specific kind of medical setups and things that people have where they are. But for people in the UK, if they're going through this at the moment, what's the first? I mean, I know you said you were able to go to like a private consultation, a private clinic to find something out. But I suppose for most people, the first port of call is going to be the GP, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely, as Pete said, keep a diary before you go. So, start to look for patterns, start to record what's happening with your periods, if they're becoming erratic, whether there's a correlation between your moods, etc., etc. So go armed, go prepared, and then go and speak to your GP around why, what is happening, and ask for that advice in the first instance. Yeah, as you correctly say, there's also private clinics, and there's loads of those popping up around the country. You know, there is a revolution going on in that respect around it. There is a cost implication for that. I mean, I think I paid £125 for my first consultation. For me personally, that was worth every penny. I was fortunate we could afford to do that. And then I think, you know, go onto the internet. So if you go on to Insta now, I follow some really interesting ladies and men, but mainly women, actually. Davina's your obvious one. Menopause Matters, the Bristol Menopause. You've got the Hormone Doctor. There's a charity called the Menopause Charity. Women of a Certain Age, another Insta page that's a good one. The Peri Menopause Doctor. So there are so many people out there who are offering advice, you know, on that forum. And I know people are critical of Instagram, but there's a lot of good content out there if you can just sift out the rubbish. And it's being able to find that information, because again, knowledge is power, isn't it?
Exactly. And maybe Pete can pop in the show notes links to some of those.
I can make.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to that, because I was trying to write it down.
Or Helen can send you.
I'll ping it over to you.
Yeah, and we'll put that in there. And
no, that's really good, because, like you say, social media. Say what you like about it. Like, I've made a lot of connections on Instagram since we've started doing this podcast, which are really positive. And if that was the whole reason why, one of the reasons why we started this as well, right? To get cut through all the hype and all the crap that's out there and try and get some decent information out there. So those people who you've just mentioned, who will be on Instagram and what have you, if that's where you can go for good information, right?
Oh yeah, they're far more expert in their knowledge and understanding than me. So go give them a follow.
But I mean, what's good is we've got someone like you who's looked into this and researched it, so you know where all these good people are. And you can, and then we can use this forum to push people in that direction to help them out. So that's hopefully this is going to help a hell of a lot of people. And like I say, it'll help a hell of a lot of men as well understand what their partners are going to be going through. Because I've written something down, actually. Right?
It's not always fun.
I've written something down just to lighten the mood a little bit. If blokes had to go through this, right? Would be talking about it all the time, because we'd be whinging about it all the time, because you were saying, like, you know, women just get on with it. They turn up to your things and don't talk about it, just get on with it, and like it's not really spoken about and all of that. But that's because women are good at that. They just get on with stuff and don't moan about it. Like, if this was blokes going through this, honestly, everyone would be talking about it, because we'd be whinging about it daily. Or I would anyway.
Just buy a motorbike or something, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Helen, if people do want to, I'm sure they will, because I mean, this has been a fantastic. I know we've gone over an hour, I think now. It's been a fantastic conversation. If people want to, you know, follow you, find out more about you, just kind of keep an eye on what you're up to, what's the best sort of? You've mentioned Instagram a few times, I know, but what's the best sort of platform for people to follow you and to find out more?
Well, yeah, that would be amazing if they wanted to. I'm Hellsbells Hawley 13 on Insta. And then I've also got a link onto, from there you can find me on Facebook as well, which is where most of my work, most of what I publish and put up is out there. And I really try hard with my posts to add value. And I'll always, you know, I like to try and keep it real and be honest with what's going on as well. So yeah, they'd be very welcome, and get in touch. You can message me. I'm more than happy to discuss in person, or, you know, via Insta, or we can email. That, yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all, because actually it's about helping people to feel better about themselves.
Excellent.
Love it. Marvelous. It's me. I'm in charge.
I'm waiting for you to do the wrap up. I'm trying not to.
Lunatics are running the assignment.
I'm trying not to go. Pete, do the wrap up.
Yeah. Okay, I will. Paul, have you got any final thoughts?
I'm on the spot now. Well, I'm busy making fun of you. And now I've got all the pressure on my shoulders. No, it's good. I mean, I work probably mainly women, so it's a really current topic, and I'm just going to share this like crazy, because so many people have asked me, and I've kind of my general go-to response is like, okay, let's just get you as healthy as possible based on the basics and see how that affects everything. But obviously having the depth of knowledge beyond that was where I lacked. So for me, it's really interesting to kind of put it in context about how you explored it and just how I can, just be more supportive to the client base. And also, I'm sure that they'll find it of real value, this, I'm hoping that they'll share it amongst their friends as well, because I think this is really interesting, combining not only the experience you've gone through, but also like, okay, how do we as professionals and how does an individual themselves support themselves through this whole process? So it's been great. Thanks for coming on. It's been great.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks, guys, for giving me the opportunity. I was quite nervous, but I've really enjoyed it.
I think it's
Don't
all those
worry,
years,
I'm nervous doing this every bloody week. What about you, James?
I was just going to say, I think that's been really interesting. I've been having really regular conversations with some of my members at the moment who are going through this, and they're kind of either just starting HRT or they're trying to get onto HRT, or
it's not always that easy.
Yeah, or they're finding out more about HRT and that sort of thing. So it's been really interesting, and I think actually it's sometimes sort of serendipitous or fortuitous, whatever the word is. But the next couple of episodes, I think, are going to lead on really, really well, because we've got Tracy Rifkind on next week, who I don't want to prematurely age her, but I'd imagine she's
been through
around the 60 mark, I would think now. She's certainly older than you. So it'd be good to kind of catch up with her. And I know she's recently got a dog and things, but talk about maybe a touch on some of this with her. And then the week after, like I mentioned, we've got Owen from My Vital Metrics, who knows an absolute ton about, bone density, about basal metabolic rate and how that changes as we age through, sarcopenia and loss of muscle, but also just the aging process that we touched on, how maybe your caloric sort of needs come down slightly as you get old, regardless of muscle. We had a really good conversation with him. So I think that this episode is going to really neatly lead into the next two. So, and it's always
some things like thyroids and stuff as well. I don't know.
Yeah, there's so much more out there.
There's so much. And just on separately to that, it's just been really lovely to catch up with you again, Helen. I know we've spent some time together in the last sort of few months with the SFB and then the SFG and then doing this. So it's been lovely to catch up with you. So thanks for coming on.
No, thanks for the opportunity, guys. It's been good.
Cool.
Helen, thank you for coming in. Every time I hear HRT, I keep thinking about the high-speed train thing that they're building from London.
Well, I think high-rise terminal. From the when you raise your voice at the end of a sentence.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Everything sounds like a question. It's called high-rise terminal.
Like the Aussies. That's how they say.
Yeah.
It's like the Aussies and the young people. We don't do that because we're older. Young people.
For yourself, Pete.
Hey. Yes, right. So Helen, honestly, that like James said, this is going to tee everything up nicely for the next couple of episodes, I think. And also, it's just been really interesting. I've learned a lot today. And I'm going to go and follow all those people on Instagram as well. And
there's loads
there'll
more.
be all these menopause things on Instagram going, God, I've got all these fellas following me for like somehow. Where did all this come from? All these geezers are really interested in menopause. But it's been really interesting. Like I say, if for the listeners, if you're listening to this and you think it'll help someone who you know, or you just want to share it anyway, I think we need to get this one out as far and wide as possible. Because like we say as well, it might even get someone who is a true expert on this as well to come and contact us, hopefully, and say, like, can I come on and educate people and educate you guys as well? So that would be really good. So please like it, please share it, leave us a review. We had a message from somebody as well who was trying to get into the Facebook group, but they couldn't for some reason. So we're looking into that. But if you've tried, we'll be on it. Don't worry. So thanks for listening. This has been episode number 66, and then and tune in next week for Tracy Rifkind.
I sure will.
Helen will. More women. You said more women, Helen. So there we go.
Yeah.
2 in a row. Fantastic. But thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you next week.
Cheers, guys.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.